All right. This doesn't make any sense. All right. Yeah, ding, ding, ding. No.
Well, welcome everybody. We're going to be starting in about 4 minutes. I just want to go through a couple things here. We're going to be starting at 6:30. We have quite a few newcomers coming into this, so we welcome all of you. Happy New Year. You'll notice that your cameras are off and your microphones are muted, and that's to allow our speaker to be able to present the whole time. And then you'll have the ability to write your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You could also use the chat if you want. The chat is more for if there's any kind of technical problems for me to deal with. My name is Natalie Cruz. I am the host here tonight, and I work at the Everett Rail Marshfield Public Library. And this is being recorded on YouTube Live. And so if you miss something or you know somebody else who might enjoy listening to this, you can do that at a later time. The chat function and the Q&A function are at the bottom. Like I said, welcome everybody. And we'll get started. We're going to let a few more minutes go by so we can get everybody in here that wants to join. So if you're looking for the spoken history with Dr. Jeff Kleiman, you are in the right place.
But I'm not a real doctor. If you have pains and aches, I can't help you. I can create pains and aches, but don't worry about it. Let's see. Okay, this is where I'm looking. You just let me know.
Yeah, I'll give it another minute here. We're
That's
getting a few more people coming on. We've got a lot of people who are interested in this topic tonight, so.
Means Tom's check's cleared, right? Okay.
So these spoken history webinars will be offered monthly throughout the year. And so I hope that you enjoy this tonight and we come back again in February and throughout the year. They will be live streamed, or they will be on the webinar like this, as long as COVID numbers are still up there pretty high. But if you don't have access to a computer, something like that, we do have people in our Felker room or our Adler room that are kind of socially distancing and able to watch this through a laptop on a TV screen. So that's why it's set up with being a webinar right now. So we're just about ready to start. It looks like it's close to 6:30. So without further ado, I will introduce our speaker tonight. And like I said, we can have you ask questions throughout his presentation by typing it into the Q&A. And then at the end of his presentation, I'll go ahead and read some of those off to him so he can answer your questions. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Jeff Kleiman. He's a history professor at the university, and he will be talking about the Karau family business, Marshfield's last locally owned and operated supermarkets. So welcome, Jeff.
Hello, hello. I'm sorry I can't see faces, just like Romper Room. I'm used to teaching online and seeing little rows of people. So I'll do what I can to imagine you all out there. Please feel free to type in a question, even as I'm talking, and say, well, when you talked about this, so we have a handle on the reference there for any questions you have. This is an abbreviated form of the book, a very brief book. Tom Karau asked me to please, and his wife, Mary especially, nudged him to write a memoir of his life and business. And Tom is really very modest and didn't want to do it. So ultimately, after a number of years of prodding, let's put it politely, he relented. And I put together a book. I'll be giving 2 copies to the library for the genealogy room. And you should be able to follow up anything of interest in a little more detail in the book. Only runs about 50, 60 pages, nothing much. Big print, double spaced, wide margins. So don't worry about it. It's I'm told it's a fun read. So let's begin with the title page. And the real heart of the matter is the subtitle. We live at a time and place when there are fewer locally owned and operated businesses. If you've lived in Marshfield for, well, we've been here 33 years, or most of your life, you've been able to see the change, but perhaps it's been so gradual, it didn't strike you as all that obvious. That Marshfield may be remote, but it is not isolated from the larger economic trends that sweep through the rest of the United States. And so we look at the Karau family business. Tom is a wonderful guy. I mean, I've known him, I don't know how long. But that alone doesn't make the topic noteworthy. There's something here of general interest to get us thinking about larger problems, issues, challenges, whatever word you want to use, that we will continue to face in the near future and will only be exacerbated as the internet. You're not seeing my screen. Well, I'm not sharing a screen. I just got a little message at the bottom of my screen saying the library couldn't see me. Is anybody else thus blessed? Let's say, I thought you might have. Okay, I'll put on the share screen when the time comes. Okay, I have it. Oh, telephones. Okay, let's see if we can pick up where we were. That the internet has destroyed many brick and mortar businesses. It has even begun to challenge the big box stores. So we really have to begin to think, what can we learn from our immediate past? What lessons are coming that we will have to address in the near future? And so with this, I will start the PowerPoint. Okay. And if you can't see it, please let me know. You'll see there is the regular PowerPoint over here. And along the side here, you can count down to finish, to when we finish. So don't lose hope. We have a way of following this through. So here we go. This is very important. And it's nice that the people, the family, were able to share this with us. Again, there'll be 2 copies of the book into the genealogy section of the library. We start with the first generation, Gustav Karau. You can see he got here around 1884, helped build, he's a carpenter and a mason, the church, the Lutheran church on Chestnut, I think it is, and 8th Street. And this is where it got torn down a number of years ago. But that was his church. And he also helped to build the pews and carved details in the armrest. So he was very typical of that group of immigrants, especially the Germans, who essentially settled central Wisconsin. At one time in the early 20th century, more than half of all the residents in Wisconsin were German or had come from Germany.
I hate to interrupt you, Jeff, but we aren't seeing your screen yet.
Okay, let's see, where's the, it says share screen, I got that. Okay. Oh, I see it. Okay, thank you. All right. Now we got it?
Yes, perfect.
All
you.
right.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, there we go. There we go. All right. All these extra buttons to push. I mean, really. All right. So this is what we have as the background. And we find that Gustav Karau and then his wife absolutely went to the farm because that's what Americans wanted. That's what many immigrants expected, was to have life on the farm, property. Property meant farm ownership, land. And here around 1899 is what is the start of a growing family. They have had 2 children before this cluster, died early on. And we find the farm, you can still find it, check the plat books, in the area known as Manville, named for that intersection where Man Road meets the railroad just north of town. What's important here is that she bore 9 children, 7 of whom survived. Not at all unusual for the 19th century and even into the 20th. But the important one we're looking at, Reinhold, he's the last of them, was born in 1905. And this is worth noting, if for no other reason than this is when great changes are coming through to American life and the economy. Okay. Let's see, I got this thing here. 6:35. Is everybody still having trouble with PowerPoint? I got a few here at 6:35.
Everything's great. Everything's good on our end.
Super. All right. I just reading messages. When Gustav died, the cause of death is not known at the moment. His wife left the farm, and Augusta Benke Karau then moved into the city of Marshfield. And the address is 71 West Arnold. And if that house still stands, you can find where she spent the rest of her life and where she was supported by her son and his enterprise, Just a little stone, excuse me. I'll have to shoot the telephone. With the graves of the 2 children who died early. You see Edward, born in 88, born December 4th, died December 23rd. Anna, born February 1st, died March 3rd. Again, this is not unusual. I've biked down H on the way to Neilsville. At the crest of one of the hills, not too far from Neilsville, is a family cemetery. The overwhelming majority of the stones there show a family wiped out, probably by smallpox or something else. And here are the graves of the first Karaus, Gustav and Augusta, birth and death dates. Those of you who want to do genealogy, here's something concrete to work with. Now, where our story really picks up, really becomes important, is for Reinhold, who throughout his life is known as Reine, the youngest of surviving children. And as in the case of many Americans, not just immigrants, native-born Americans, said, you know, farm life is really hard. It hurts. I'm not sure I can see much of a future in this. I'll go to town and see what I can do for wages. Well, again, you read here, he unloaded grain cars for the Urtmeier Heinz General Store. And he found that probably as bad, as bad or worse than farm work. It was demanding, and perhaps these sort of jobs of heavy lifting and moving could end up causing an early death or crippling him. So with these very pragmatic thoughts, he figured, if I'm going to survive to a decent age, I'd better learn how to wait on the trade. And so we find that today as well. The economy is shifting. This is very important. What we find is a movement from a farm and wood-fueled economy into the 20th century with service and heavy industry and a coal-powered economy. And I say this as a point of comparison for where we are today, which is electricity and service-dominated economy. And its significance is something you can sit down with a coffee and chat about. If you'd like, let me know. I'll meet and kibitz with you. It'd be my pleasure. But these are great and important changes that shape our world. By 1905, Marshfield's population doubled. And what's critical about this is the service economy depends on a large population requiring services, not necessarily goods manufactured, and not raw farm products, as in the case of the Binzel bean factory later on, the canning factory. What is important here is, do you have enough people to whom to sell things? Is there enough room for competition that will allow people to innovate, take risks, and perhaps survive or thrive? I mean, this issue of population, demography, is very, very important. And so what we find here, that from 1890, we've gone from 3,400 to almost 7,400 residents. That is quite a rate of increase for a city of any size. And getting people accustomed to an urban as opposed to rural and agricultural life. Oh, that's right, I want to go back. I want to go back to this image for a moment and point out how important this is. This is how everybody shopped in the United States through most of their history whenever you had a general store. General meaning a variety of goods, not a specialty. And what you'll find is all the goods are shelved behind the counter and the register. You had people along the way to help you cut meat, move along with the vegetables, dry goods, cloth, gingham, bolts of material, packaged, canned goods. And you would come in, give the head clerk your basket and your shopping list, and they would come through and they would fill it for you. And this was normative. This was normative. What we take for granted is a profound change, a profound different way of handling retail sales in groceries and many other things as well. So it's into this world that Riney comes, working in that sort of market in town, and then wondering what can come next. He spends the next time working for a number of the A&P stores in town, managing, dealing with retail, inventory, and the fundamentals of any service business. And yet, as I've said briefly here, he understood the challenge of pricing goods in a competitive manner without jeopardizing profit margins, and you don't want to sacrifice quality. One of the things that makes Riney Karau important, as well as Tom, is that they were risk takers. They were innovators. They looked ahead to see what was happening elsewhere. How could they bring it to Marshfield? Not only provide the ability to stay in business, but something better for the people who lived here. And so for both these men, especially Riney, selling more goods at a lower price would yield greater commercial benefit, right? You deal in volume. The more goods you have, the lower your margin of profit can be, and the difference is made up in volume. And Riney sees this, he figures it out. The Atlantic and Pacific markets had begun to emerge. Let's see, 2 participants raised their hands. Let's see. On the side of the screen. Okay, if I knew what that means. All right.
I'm not seeing that.
Okay, that's on the chat. So this is the first innovation. And what you'll see here is one of Weber Brothers Groceries. Some of you may remember that family, that he opened up next to it in an established building. And he has it next to a bakery. So the food market, it's a food market, and the labeling becomes important. You can see it here in the late 20s and in towards the early 30s. So he's there and thinking, maybe I should try this, see how well it floats, how well we can do with this. And again, it's Riney Karau's food market. The Weber brothers. Note the local name and importance attached to say, yeah, this is good stuff because I know the people who sell it. When's the last time you were able to see that or say that where you shopped in town? Where of any of the big box stores? Any of the big grocery chains? Where have you known anybody to whom you could turn and with some reasonable expectation, expect accountability? And this is a parting shot. This is the rearview mirror shot of where things are going to go. He opened the first shop in 1932. And as you may have learned in your history books, 1932 was the worst part of the global economic collapse that had begun in 1929. By 1932, 1 out of 4 wage earners were out of a job. Farmers were burning crops, chopping down orchards, killing shoats, cattle, taking produce, if you will, commodities off the market in order to increase scarcity and thereby drive up the price. One of the most violent episodes in Wisconsin's history is the milk strike of 1932 into 33. I wrote a little bit about that 25 years ago in the Marshfield history book. It turned neighbor against neighbor. People carried guns. There were nail strips put by vigilante farmers to keep people from coming into town. At one point, Ronnie Karau wanted to head out of town to bring in some milk for children, and they talked him out of it. In many ways, Marshfield is not unusual, but recall early on, milk, cheese, butter were integral to the city's economy and to the surrounding farms. There's this symbiotic relationship with lumbering, farming, and then dairy processing that gave this town a solid base beyond the transport of timber and cutting it into dimensional lumber. We can see by this headline that Riney took a real chance in July of 41. Wars going on in Europe. We're sort of coming out of the Depression, but we're still running about 10 to 15% unemployment. It won't drop below that until the United States begins to help Great Britain in the Lend-Lease plan. And then finally into January of 43, when we shift to full-time war production for the two-front war in Europe and Asia, the Pacific Ocean, when we will have virtual unemployment in the United States. But again, it shows a bit of foresight, good fortune, the ability to take a calculated risk that here is a new building, well, new to him, and look at the innovation with the huge shop windows. That here's the signage that will change, advertising what's inside. You didn't see that before. That on the awning, we got the name, but again, what we have now is not a food market. We have a supermarket. 1920, 1910, you ask for a supermarket. But what are people going to tell you? What are you talking about? I don't know what a supermarket is. This is cutting edge. It may be in some larger cities where there's larger markets and more money able to be invested. But again, the timing is interesting. At both ends of the Depression, Ronnie decides it's not good enough. Things can't remain the same. We have to do something innovative. Again, a little bit closer look at the store at 337 South Central, and everything that we take for granted today in the supermarket, we see in Riney's store here in 1941. Among the many innovations we see here is the cleanliness, in-store watered fresh fruit. I think the original newspaper article talks about a vaporizer. You know, if you go into the grocery store today, they've got this automatic little spraying machine. You know, sometimes you hear the rumble of thunder. But to just keep the produce fresh, keep it glistening, make it attractive. This was another innovation that Briney made. We have clerks, yes, helping stock and maintain inventory, but also available to answer questions and help. This is quite the opposite from that other slide that we saw, where you saw the small crowded store, goods along the walls, counters in front of the goods, and the clerks to help you are standing there for the photograph, but then stand behind the counter gathering goods in actual operation. Over here is Rainey Karau, photo op, looking at the goods, showing the abundance of goods, processed and fresh. As Americans, we assume prosperity and abundance is natural and is our right. As Americans, we don't understand how different we are and have been in many different ways, particularly when it comes to food production, distribution, and retailing. And here's one of the adverts when the store first opened. Okay. Absolutely vital to understand what we have today, what has changed, what not, and why it might be important. The third and boldest innovation is Washington Square. I assume we all know Washington Square. And it's called that because, because that's where the old Washington School burnt down. It was antiquated, it was dangerous, and thankfully nobody was in it when it caught fire. It became an empty lot. Rainey formed a corporation to buy the entire block and build an expanded supermarket that would also have a variety of goods in it, including a place to sit and just lounge or relax or take a few moments with a series of counters. He was going to call it the Gemütlichkeit, the coziness, if you will, but it ended up being the coffee break. Again, I want to go back just a moment to show you how this is different. That what we find over here in the cut line under the photograph is that this is the first of a trio of new Marshfield food stores to reach completion in Karau's supermarket, which will open tomorrow. Up to the minute in every respect, the new market is the latest development of a program of consistent expansion, which began with the establishment of the business in May 1932. The building will also house the E.R. Radke Meat Department, the Sunnyside Bakery, and the C.W. Mitten Electrical Equipment Agency. Now, while the names may be interesting, basically, Rainey Karau has set up a supermarket where other independent businesses can find space and sell related goods in demand in a central location. Instead of running down the street to the butcher or the baker, look at what you have here. This drive to have everything under a single roof. And basically what we have seen since then is the range of goods under one roof expand. Think for a moment, the super duper Walmart allows you to have your car repaired, car parts, clothing, household goods, and food, shopping. All right. We see in the Pick and Save, there's now a pharmacy there. And even before that, a variety of stores having pharmacies, opticians, and the like. So what Rainey began, or was early to catch on to, is a way of innovation that is now taken for normal today. Now, what else is important about this store, about this supermarket, you will notice a parking lot. You all take it for granted. We all take it for granted now. But again, when we look at the original store, well, let's see, apprenticeship, you're parking along the street. There's no such thing as a parking lot. Automobiles are not the norm. Many people have them, but they're not the abundance. The population neither is that large. So when we look at the nature of retail and customer access to that retail, it's a much smaller, more densely populated, crowded place to come and go, with a bakery, groceries, butcher shop, wherever the specialty shops are, you're going to stop, is where you do your business. And if you're walking or you're relying on somebody else for transportation, what you can carry is going to be limited. It's not until the early 1930s the shopping cart gets invented in Florida. And the shopping cart of that day is much, much smaller than the shopping carts we have to deal with today. I don't know the volume change, but it's like, some of you may remember when Coca-Cola came in 6-ounce bottles. And now you can go to a drive-through restaurant and get a foot bath sized soda. I have seen students drinking these huge reserves of soda. It's just amazing. All our expectations have grown phenomenally. Let's see. So that's one of the elements that makes this important. A second element is that it's the Independent Grocers Alliance. That this is not associated with any chain, and there's plenty of them growing and expanding across the United States at this time. But the Independent Grocers Alliance began in the Depression era, and it was to bring small, privately owned and operated grocery stores the benefits of large-scale purchasing to help reduce costs and yet assure some level of margin of profit. The third part of why this building was important, and it is a shame that people felt the necessity to destroy it in its entirety, is that in this original section, we find architectural outline and detail by Victor Gruen. Now, Victor Gruen was in the day, the mid to late 50s, even into the early 50s, and then into the 60s and 70s, an internationally respected designer of shopping spaces, among other things. He, if not invented, helped establish the first shopping mall. I think it was outside Minneapolis. And the inside, if you remember it, had these huge wooden arched beams angling and setting the roof at that angle. Very, very different, something very urbane, something very sophisticated in terms of architecture. I remember when my wife and I got here, we went shopping, we said, oh my gosh, what is this doing here? And you're going to ask, well, how did Riney Karau manage to snag an internationally known architect, innovative architect, to come to Marshfield? And in many ways, the answer is what made Marshfield the hub city. That's the railroad. He had corresponded with Victor Gruen before Victor came into this part of the country. And Victor was going to travel from Chicago to Minneapolis, but he didn't like to fly. As in the case of many Europeans, he did not have a driver's license. In Europe, the default was public transportation or a cab. Only in the United States have we taken private transportation as the default position. So he didn't have a driver's license. So what's left? Well, what you do in Europe, you take the train. And the halfway point between Chicago and Minneapolis is Marshfield. So Victor Gruen stopped by, he and Riney talked. Gruen drew up the plans and Riney executed them. And this is very, very modern. 50 years later, more, almost 20 years later, 50, my gosh, almost 60 years later, is it? I don't want to think about it. More than 60 years later, this is really quaint, but at the time it was cutting edge. Enter Tom Karau. I assume some of you knew Tom and his wife, Mary. So here is Tom Karau, and you can see that's not the Tom Karau we know and remember. That's Tom Karau at 21 with his resume in hand and sets out to find work. Tom was unusual in many ways, but mostly is the fact that he had not only a college education at Madison, but a master's degree in business administration. He had a level of education and professional experience that was reserved to a relative minority of men entering the business world, virtually unheard of among women. He also came out looking for work at a very, very good time. After his 2-year stint in the Army, again, the draft was restated in 1950 after the end of World War II, got rid of it. So he had that comic experience with different people. But again, the education at Madison was critical in setting him apart and getting him to think differently. This is Hillman's, the grocery chain in Chicago, where Tom did his apprenticeship, his early practice exposure to the field. He wanted to move up faster than they were willing to move him up. And so he moved to a chain in upstate New York that was growing. And he decided to focus on meat cutting as his strength. And unlike many people who have worked from the bottom up, he actually did literally work from the bottom up as a unionized meat cutter. And as such, he learned what is it like to work under these conditions? What do unions offer that some people will not? What impact will this have on your workforce and your attitude of yourself with your workforce? For me, as a one-time labor historian, and having met a number of people in Tom's position, a goodly number of them did not actually begin working the trade from the bottom up. You lose many, many insights if you float in and remain clueless about the chain of production, storage, delivery, retail. You've got to know every part of the business. And he did. He finally returns home in the mid-60s. And again, where he comes to is an incredible period of growth, almost unprecedented economic growth in the United States. Probably the best economic times in the United States for the majority of people was 1948 to 1968, when the United States dominated the world economy. And that's about the only way I can think to say. In part, we were the only economy to remain intact, let alone strengthen and grow during the Second World War. Everyone else had been bombed to flinders. Soviet Union, yeah, but they never had the same need or market-driven economy as the United States. There's many things that make for this, but the timing for Tom and for Marshfield, again, was absolutely fantastic. The impetus to expand Washington Square was to demonstrate it could be profitable and provide self-generated revenue. And again, wow, those 20 years after expanding the store and getting a number of different people to go in and establish businesses with him on the site of the grocery store were phenomenal in American history. Marshfield's population in that 20-year period increased by more than 20%. But we also have to keep in mind the human factor. History is a record of human behavior, okay? We are part and parcel of our family, friends, when and where we live somewhere. For Tom, it's a very important and personal decision. His father was dying of a type of cancer and was just terminal, incurable. 4 years before this, his wife had died, and there were still 2 younger siblings growing up here in Marshfield. Riney wrote to his son asking him to come home. Tom is at the time in the middle of an incredible career, moving farther and farther up the food chain. It seemed like there would be no stopping him. It was the opposite of where he had started the business in Chicago. Yet he says that it was the easiest and hardest decision that he ever made. Even though his career continued to take off in upstate New York, family and hometown, the chance to develop the family business in New Times, meant much more than staying in upstate New York. So here again is an example of the willingness to innovate, to take a calculated risk, to take your knowledge and experience, okay? Knowledge and experience to try something new, An important piece of this dramatic transformation is the clinic. We cannot pretend otherwise. The clinic moved from its brand new building, former City Hall, in the 60s and the 70s, all the way now to 1990 plus on the top of the hill by Oak Street, St. Joseph. That, granted, this image is more current, but even so, the clinic provided a dramatic change to the city of Marshfield by accelerating the number and variety of people who came to live and work in town. It would become the largest employer and draw people from as far as 20 or 25 miles away to commute. So in reaching this new, more diverse, professional, a bit wealthier, a group of residents, Tom opened up the warehouse on North Central. It not only encouraged bulk buying, but also began to offer an array of different sort of foods, spices, other goods, other produce that might not have appeared in Marshfield were it not for the medical staff and physicians that would demand a more diverse supply of food. We have to, again, remember population. What is that population like? How does that population have an impact on available markets, innovation, and the way in which we do business on a daily basis? Ultimately, around the year 2000, Tom hung it up. You got to know when to fold them. He learned of a Walmart distribution center not far away, and the plans to create a super center in Marshfield. It's one thing to compete locally and regionally. He, as I wrote a little bit in the book here, he was able to deal with, again, local grocery, local grocers, local folks competing in the marketplace, even some regional chains, okay, in what is now, what used to be Rainbow Foods. But when you look at Walmart, it's not just a big box. It is a predatory giant. Where Walmart puts down a footprint, small businesses die. Walmart does not believe in competition. Walmart believes in domination. And certainly there are benefits for many people. But whenever we look at these larger stores and these chain operations, particularly on an international level, we must ask ourselves, as with any innovation, at what price? What is the trade-off? What do we lose or give up in order to gain this new thing? So Tom was able to sell out to Cops, a hub player, if you will, in IGA wholesale retail. And they were able to take the downtown store as well as the warehouse market, and he was able to liquidate his holdings. And it's with that, the last family-owned and operated grocery business ended, which had been in place here since 1932. I see people raised hands, but I don't know how to answer it. I'll let our host take care of that. And I just leave you with this slide just to summarize 3 takeaway points. We are all part of the story, some more obviously than others, but we're all here and depend on and rely upon each other. The Karau story touches on immigration, Wisconsin, and American history. And the family history grants us an insight into the transformation of American retail in the 20th century. Perhaps we should not romanticize the world we've lost and accept change, but also say, perhaps we have something to say about the nature of that change. But that's a story for another day. I will end the screen sharing and we will turn to my horrifying face and try to answer any questions. Okay, I saw there were 2 hands raised, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think those were from when they were trying to see the screen share at the beginning. So I think we're okay with that. So
Okay.
if you want to use this time, if anybody has any questions, to go ahead and type those in the Q&A. Thank you so much, Jeff. This was so interesting.
I hope it was okay.
Oh, it was wonderful. I'm a transplant here in Wisconsin, and my father owned a small grocery store in Iowa where I was raised. And so this all kind of touches my heart on a whole different level. And I think it's a loss when you lose a family business like that. We have Eva Karau saying, very nice presentation. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Let's see what else we have here.
Yeah, but that's family.
Oh.
That doesn't count.
You're getting claps from the Adler room. People are applauding. So.
Well, thank you.
And then Dave Kleba says, do you know what year the store at 337 Central closed?
No, I don't. In trying to go through the history here, the pressure was to keep it concise and not get into too many details. On the other hand, people who do genealogy or local history, there's a lot of open-ended questions here.
Definitely.
If you are a high school teacher, here's an opportunity for a number of projects to contribute to local history.
Tom Karau actually says it was 1959.
Oh, if I knew he was listening, I wouldn't have said those nice things.
Also, we have, I think it's Susan. So interesting and informative. You are a very good speaker.
Thank you.
And Annette says, I got to the presentation late. Did I hear about a book or books that were published?
Yes, this is, Tom asked for a little history, family history of the business, history of the family business. Put your modifiers where you will. And it's relatively short and easy to read. It's less than 60 pages. It has many of the same images here, only clearer. And I'll be donating 2 copies to the genealogy room.
Wonderful.
Okay, so you can look at it. If you want to get a copy otherwise, you might want to talk to Tom and see what he has in mind. I'm a mere tool in the hands of greatness.
We also have someone asking where you can purchase that book.
It's not for sale.
Not for
Again, if there are enough people, perhaps I'll talk to Tom and see what he wants to do.
Okay.
Because we still have the ability, we have the original master copy and can do some additional copies.
Okay.
And I don't know whether if he's interested, or I could take it from here and ask him if he wants, what he wants unit cost to be
Sure.
for each book.
We have Joanne Gosh asking, which Marshfield history book did you cite in your talk? And I believe you were probably talking about the Marshfield story. Is that correct? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
in 1997, I worked with a bunch of wonderful people. And that Marshfield storybook got state recognition for being unusual. Because the first part was a history of the town, the context, and then businesses, and then families.
Yeah.
So you get to know who came here and why, and what were they doing.
Yep. We also have a great many copies of that at the library, both volume 1 and volume 2 that are available for checkout if you ever want to do that, anyone, because they just have a ton of pictures and historical information in there. Dave Kleba also said, I'd like to thank you. My father worked for both Karaus for over 40 years in the meat department.
Tom remembers, I think, most every division manager.
Wow.
In the century and a half that he lived through the business. It was difficult to try and narrow down whom to mention. We could have had a phone book of names. But, I see here that Tom Karau also posted, he'd be happy to send anyone a copy.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so that's good. Let's see. Ronnie Karau was my great uncle. Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah. Again, there's some anecdotes from the Depression. I tried to include here. I mean, you could write so much more And both the Marshfield story and this Karau's book exist as a jumping off point to
Definitely.
raise questions for people to ask and try to answer.
We have a Bob Sanders, former member of Marshfield business community, but now located in Texas, says you did a very good job of presenting the Karau family business. Very good. Often think I should work on history of my family business also.
Very good.
Yep. I think I've caught just, well, maybe there's a couple more here.
Chris Franklin raised a hand. I don't see the raised hand.
I think sometimes when people accidentally mouse over it, it might be doing that. I'm not seeing that anyone's doing that. Sarah Olson says Tom's innovation of having small businesses like the coffee shop within his stores seems ahead of its time. I also agree with that. That was amazing. Was there anything else like it in Wisconsin at the time that you know of?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the closest thing I could say was SS Kresge and W.T. Grant. Right, the building is now still on Central, but it's something else. And all of those had built-in lunch counters.
Wow.
Right, with the built-in lunch counters and the little stools you sat on. I remember growing up in Boston, my mother or grandmother would go into town and we'd stop at Kresge's or Woolworths. And I could sit at the counter in a store. Wow, that was exciting.
It was.
And the old Karau's, yes, the old Karau's is where the Pick and Save is now. And I want to say shortly after 2000 is when they took down the warehouse. And yes, that is just to the north side of McDonald's. That's where the warehouse stood.
We have a Michael Moots who says, my grandmother Ione used to work at the old Karau's where Pick and Save is. Yep. When did they take down the Karau's? Did you just answer that?
Yeah, the
Okay,
Karau's
sorry.
south and north side
Yep.
came down about the same time. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact year.
Okay. And
There's plenty of room for it, but I just don't have it.
Robert Sanders wants to know, are we able to buy volume 1 and volume 2? I'm assuming you're talking about the Marshfield history book. You used to be able to get those, but I don't know if you can get any more in print with that. I can check into that. There might be a
Do a
place.
shameless self-promotion.
We do have several here to check out, though. We
Check
have
out.
at least, I think, 9 copies of each. And then we have a couple in our Felker room that don't check out that are always here. So you're always welcome. And if you're out of state or somewhere, we can look for certain names for you and I can send photocopies or whatever if you just call the library here. And Matt
Occasionally-
Matson says, my grandfather was Gustav's nephew and who he persuaded to come to the US. How do we get a hold of Tom Karau?
I can give you his email. I will ask him first,
Yeah, definitely.
okay? And I will pass it along to our gracious hostess here.
Okay.
And then she has the list of everybody and let it go out, okay? But first I want to check with him before giving it to a larger group.
Sure.
You might want to check Thimbleberry Books. It is the used bookstore in town. It's the only bookstore in town now.
It's a great bookstore in town.
And occasionally copies come in and my wife is very, very careful on the quality. Okay.
And
The
we had
other
somebody
one-
within the library asking, or just saying that Wings had a gift shop in Karau's, if anybody remembers that.
They had a Wings drugstore.
Mhm.
Used to be Rexall. If you remember Rexall, you should already be in bed. You shouldn't be up so late. I mean, there's a variety of these families and family businesses, some of whom are related to a larger chain, such as Rexall or CVS, and others such as the Karau's, who may have a family business, but then jump into the franchise because you get larger advertising and markets. So, yeah. Oh, there's Tom just posted his email. And it's Reineck, R-E-I-N-I-E-K, Reineck 333 at gmail.com.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's a good thing I have you looking at these too. There's a lot of them coming in here.
Mhm. Oh, the
Gavin-
Karau Benke trees, yeah. Oh,
Gavin
again,
says, great history, Professor Kleiman. Really enjoyed the historical context of regional, national, and world events presented while telling the Karau story. Thank you. Nicole,
probably if you don't already belong to the Genealogy Society, or if you're not in the area, Don and Vicky Schnitzler are the people to contact.
definitely.
The people to contact. I'll also talk to the library. There may be maps left that were reprinted, 2 maps of Marshfield in these old 1890s format, 1880s, 1890s format, were called bird's eye views.
Mhm.
And they were very popular in the 19th century. So you could contact them, or I could ask about it and see if they're available, and then maybe we can get in touch with the group again if you all are interested.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more follow-up questions too. Donald Schnitzler says volume 1 of the Marshfield story is not available. The second volume, we have about 60 copies left. They're available at the Upham Mansion. Anne says, thank you for your work and highlighting this local Karau history. Well done. There's the email again.
Robert Sanders, I can read you the email address if you'd like. Just let me know.
Yeah, I can type it too in the chat here for everyone too.
Okay.
At the end of this, I'll try to remember to do that.
Yes. Okay, and Don Schnitzler says, yes, these are where the additional copies of the 2 maps are at the Northwood County Historical Society, the Upham House. So there's some copies of the Marshfield history there, and volume 2, and then the maps. So that's good to know. Thank you, Donald. I wasn't sure what had happened.
Yep, and I just posted the email in the chat for everyone to see. I have a hard time doing 2 things at once sometimes.
Look, to me, multitasking is doing 2 jobs poorly.
Let's see here. I think I've hit almost everybody here. Sarah Olson says, lovely presentation. Thanks to everyone involved for helping tell the stories so they aren't lost. Nicole Denardis says, hi, it looks like 701 West Arnold now has a parking lot.
Come back to automobiles again, don't we? Tear down paradise and put up a parking lot.
Yes.
Don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Oh, nice song there too. Tammy Aller says, Riney was my husband's great uncle. Thank you for the interesting history lesson. Pam Johnson says, Steve and Pam Johnson say hi and a great job, Jeff and Tom. And not sure who says this because it's only giving me part of the name. This is quite an exception. I think Tom is being way too modest. He has had great success and built the business, always improving process and product. We were fortunate to have him and his family in this community. I think we can all agree to that, definitely.
It is a generation of people that we have yet to find today in Marshfield.
Yes. Well, I am so glad that all of you joined tonight. We had quite a few new names and things, and just want you to know that we'd love to see you again next month for the spoken history. The next spoken history talk will be February 10th, and the speaker will be Vicki Schnitzler, and it will be about the Out and About Marshfield 150, which provides details about a column and a contest that will be appearing in the Hub City Times every week throughout the year. And that's in celebration of Marshfield's 150th anniversary. So we hope to see all of you that were here tonight again next month. And I thank you so much, Dr. Kleiman, for speaking tonight. You were very interesting, and we all learned quite a few things, I think, of this, and reminisced a little bit as well.
And to you, a shout out from Sarah Wonderly.
Oh,
So,
thank you, Sarah. All
all
right.
right, so you all take care. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I appreciate that. And if there's anything else I can help with, please feel free to contact me. My contact can come to the library. Just
We'll get you in touch with them, definitely.
very
So,
good. Thank you
yes.
all so very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.